Hi, this is David at TED-IELTS, and for today's video I'm going to teach you some vocabulary that will help you in your IELTS test. I firmly believe that the best way of learning vocab is by studying different topics, and so today we're going to look at the topic of work and employment. Now this video is divided into chapters. I'm going to first tell you why you need to be able to talk about work, then show you some vocab. Next, I'll tell you about a few common problems that people have with work-related language, before then testing your knowledge at the end with a tricky quiz. Right, let's start the lesson. Although the IELTS exam often feels difficult and random, the topics that you encounter are usually pretty typical of daily life. You won't be asked to talk about quantum physics or microbiology, for example. Instead, the things you're asked to speak about will be subjects that anyone could discuss. Education, technology, reading, friendship, and so on. One topic that frequently appears in all sections of the test is that of work. Some of you might be thinking, but I'm too young and haven't got any work experience yet. But that's okay. The questions will be pretty basic, and so you don't actually need any work experience to answer them. Though admittedly it might help. Just knowing some basic information about salaries and working hours, job titles and responsibilities, etc. would be enough. So how does the topic of work typically arise? Well, in the IELTS reading test, you will often find passages about different jobs. In the listening exam, you might hear someone asking about a job vacancy. As for speaking, it could arise in any of the three parts. In part 1, you could be asked whether you work or study. In part 2, you might be asked about a job you want to do. Part 3 would feature a more abstract issue, such as whether there should be a fixed retirement age. As for the writing exam, it is common to see issues about which type of worker deserves a high salary or whether students should be trained in certain skills for the workplace. As you can see then, although these are not necessarily easy to answer, they do not require any specialist knowledge, and so almost anyone would have a good chance of giving a great answer. Still though, it is useful to know some words related to the general topic of work in order to do well, as topic-specific language can really help you in speaking and writing. In this section, I'm going to show you some useful language and then give you examples of how to use it. I assume that the people watching this will be familiar with the most basic words, so I will try to include some that I think you do not already know. Let's start with a word that many of you will not be familiar with: apprentice. This means a person who is learning a trade from a skilled employer, having agreed to work for a fixed period at low wages. It can actually be a verb or a noun, though I think it's much more common as a noun. We can say things like, to become a carpenter, you have to be an apprentice for a while to pick up the skills. That's the noun form, of course, but we can also say things like, he was apprenticed to a master painter for several years before getting his own studio. Another related word is apprenticeship, which is very similar but refers to the period of time someone serves as an apprentice. For example, his family told him that if he did an apprenticeship, he would be able to get a great job, but so far he has struggled. Our next word is benefits, and this could actually have two very different meanings in the context of employment. The first is the formal bonuses that you get from working somewhere. For example, some companies offer perks such as insurance payments, time off, cash rewards for good performance, access to certain facilities, and so on. The other means money that the state will pay you for not working. These are usually referred to as unemployment benefits, but you might also hear them called welfare, social security, or being on the dole. Next we have commute. This word means to travel back and forward from work and can either be a verb or a noun. When people go to and from work, we call it commuting. When a person does this, they become a commuter. Here are some examples. Our next word is not actually a word, it's a phrase: earn a living. This means to make money, with the inference being that it is your main job and will pay most or all of your living expenses. We could say, for example, I plan on earning a living by editing videos for YouTubers, or she's a teacher now, but she used to earn a living in advertising. Let's now look at a word that could be a verb, noun, adjective, or adverb. This is freelance, and it basically means working for oneself by temporarily doing jobs for another company. As an adjective, we say, I'm a freelance editor. As an adverb, we could say, I've worked freelance for about 3 years now. The noun form, however, changes to become freelancer, meaning the person that does this. They might say, it's great being a freelancer, but it can be scary during times of economic distress. The verb form is a bit less common, but basically we can say, I freelanced for a couple of years when I was young, but then felt that a regular salary was less stressful. Our next words are intern and internship. An internship is the position of a student or trainee who works in an organization, sometimes without pay, in order to gain work experience. And an intern is any person who does this. We might say, for example, I plan on doing a short internship with a financial company before deciding on my next steps, or that company is looking for 10 new interns right now. While you surely know the word leave as a verb, it can also be a noun in the context of work. We often talk about paid leave, maternity leave, paternity leave, sick leave, and so on. This means a period of time when someone is given the right not to come into work. For example, he broke his leg and has been on sick leave for a month. The word overtime is quite common nowadays and refers to time worked outside of regular hours. It can also refer to the money earned during that time. We usually say work overtime, such as, she's been working overtime all week to get this project finished. But when talking about money, we typically say pay overtime. For example, watch out for that company. They always make you stay late but never pay any overtime. Our next word is salary, which refers to a fixed regular payment typically paid on a monthly basis but often expressed as an annual sum. Now, in most English-speaking countries, people don't like to mention salaries, so be careful when talking about it. But we can talk quite generally about it. We say things like, as long as my salary is enough to cover my rent and bills, I don't care much. I'm not looking to get rich and would rather have job satisfaction. The next word is training. This means a period of time spent learning a set of skills. Typically, most jobs require new employees to undergo a few days or weeks of training before taking on real responsibilities. We might say, for example, it's not something you can just do right away. You have to undergo a training period first. Finally, our last word is wage, more typically used in the plural form, wages. This refers to money earned on a daily or weekly rate. We might say something like, the wages aren't great, but I really like the job, and that's more important than money. Now, with that last word, I'm sure some of you are asking, well, what's the difference between salary and wage? Well, we'll cover that in the next section. When it comes to the topic of work, IELTS candidates often make errors with certain confusing terms. As I mentioned at the end of the last chapter, one of those is the mix-up between salary and wage. If you paid attention to my explanations, you already know that salary refers to money earned on a monthly basis and is usually referred to as an annual sum. We would say, for example, she earns $100,000 a year, but would know that this would be paid in 12 monthly installments. When talking then about money we earn for full-time jobs paid in this way and agreed upon as a yearly rate, we say salary. A wage, on the other hand, is what you're more likely to get for part-time work or maybe for some freelance jobs. It is either paid daily or weekly and is typically expressed as an hourly sum. For example, he earns $22 an hour, which sounds like a lot, but his wages hardly cover his rent right now. We know that he probably gets paid each week, but we talk about this as an hourly value. Thus, you can see that wage and salary are quite different. However, there's another problem here. Whilst we say wages in the plural form, we do not talk about one person as having salaries. Certainly, we can talk about the employees of a company earning different salaries, but this clearly means that each person has one salary. We cannot say she earns good salaries, for example. We instead say she earns a good salary. However, we could say he earns a decent wage or he earns decent wages. When talking about wages and salaries, we also need to be careful about expressing values. We cannot say more salary or more salaries. We instead say higher. For example, last week he asked for a higher salary. Another common problem is the word work itself. This can be a verb or noun. You can go to work or you can work hard. However, in the context of employment, we cannot make this plural. It is not correct to say he has two different works in the same way we would say he has two different jobs. We only pluralize this when talking about works of art or public works. We can, of course, still put an S on the end when making the present simple tense, such as he works for 8 hours every day. Similarly, the word experience or the phrase work experience are not countable in terms of a period of time working somewhere. Whilst we can have interesting experiences, we cannot talk about gaining work experiences in a particular job. Finally, this may seem easy to some people, but many people confuse employee and employer. The rule is actually consistent across other words like interviewee and interviewer. Basically, the person whose title ends with E does something for the person whose name ends in er. In other words, the person with R at the end is typically the leader or is doing something to that other person. If you have any confusion over these words or any other work-related vocabulary, you can just post them as a question in the comments section below. Right, now it's time to test your knowledge. Using the words that we have learned in this video, including both the 2 previous chapters, I would like you to fill in the blanks on this passage. I recommend that you pause the video and take a few minutes to think carefully about what could logically go into these blank spaces. Once you've got the answers, you can write them as a comment below. You can then click play and check whether or not you were right. Oh yeah, and why don't you go ahead and click like while you've got the video paused. Okay, now let's look at those answers. Here they are. Did you get them all right? Firstly, the answer is apprenticeship because it is an alternative to university, meaning that it is a period of time spent learning on the job. Also, the word "an" told you that it had to start with a vowel sound. Then we had internship, another "an" being a giveaway. This is something that many university students do in order to build up their work experience. We know that number 4 must be salary because we cannot say good wages, and because there is no article before 5, we know it must be a plural word, benefits. I hope that everyone got 6 right because overtime is what you get paid for working late, and when you go home from work, that's part of your commute. I hope that this lesson was interesting for you. If so, let me know in the comments. I try to make lessons that appeal to as many people as possible, so if you really like learning vocabulary in this way, then I will try to make more lessons. You might also be interested in my various articles about work and employment, which you can find by searching TED-IELTS.com for either of those words. Well, that's all for me today. Don't forget to keep practicing these words on a daily basis if you want to incorporate them into your long-term vocabulary. Daily practice is essential if you want to boost your vocab skills and move towards a higher band score.